that comes, it comes every 2 weeks on a Tuesday. And also, when that comes, it also comes with the NeoThink newsletter. And Brenda Reinhardt is doing an excellent job on that. And it's getting bigger, but lately it's been slowing up. So if you want to put an article on there, if you want to find out more about the newsletter, let's get involved here, because she puts a lot of work into this. But lately, I've been having to give an article like every other week now or something, because nobody's volunteering here. If that keeps up, we will start doing it once a month, because we have to pull things out of the air almost to fill it up anymore. That's not good. Let's get active here. Keep Brenda busy, otherwise she gets in trouble. so let's keep her busy. We are going to talk about the summit, but not for a lot. We do have Sage going, so Sage hit the stars. There he is. He's dying to go. Sage, how are you?
Thank you, Charlie. I think we're getting this down. Hi, Juanita.
Hi.
Hi. I just will be quick. I know everybody's heard so much about the summit already. I will try my best to be quick, but everybody knows about it. I think we've flooded the airways as much as we can with it. It's the big event, that we come from Heirloom Jewel. CRISPR really look at it together. So that's all available on that Saturday. There's a lot of thought going into this so that you are immersed in the atmosphere. And if you just search Independent Thinker Summit, we want to hear from you. And the tell
Is that
if you're she'll help and heard a lot of work, and we use the list for $50 to $60 tops for the ticket, and they serve the brunch there. So it seems like it's
But Dave, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week, man. Finally.
You too.
Cheers.
Yes.
All right. So, people, if you have a chance, especially if you live close by, get there next Saturday. And we'll have a great time. Believe me, it's a lot of fun, and you'll meet a lot of people. And I can't say anything else. I think we said everything that we could say for the last 3-4 months. So let's get to work, Juanita.
Has it been 3 months? Well, I have to say this, Charlie. It's getting, the nitty gritty. Coming from the West Coast, I'm going through a lot of nitty gritty here. So I'm so grateful for my mini day, because I don't think I wouldn't be energized enough to get there, but now I am, because I know I'm going to get on a bigger boat.
I'm going to get on a bigger plane to get on a bigger boat.
Yeah, bigger plane for a bigger boat. That's right. So I'm very excited about being there next week. I'll be flying in on Thursday, and in fact, this call next week, hopefully my plane's on time, Charlie, or you'll be solo, or you'll have to get Karen to come up and help you out, because...
No, I was taking off next Thursday.
Oh, well, then I don't think you better take off, Charlie. I'll be in the air.
No, don't worry about it. We will be on next week, people.
Yeah,
we will be on.
He's teasing. He'll be here.
And then, well, anyway, let's get to work.
I wanted to make sure that everybody knew the recording for this night's call, and that number is...
Absolutely, what a rush. We had so many people on, but it was a great, 282 weeks. Do the math. It's a lot of years. And I think I missed one. So it's interesting, the difference between Frank R. Wallace and Mark Hamilton. They both have the same writings of it, or they have the same thoughts on it, but it's just how they deliver. And Frank R. Wallace always delivered, obviously, a little more from the AC world than from the civilization of the universe. He didn't take anything. But we are on chapter 28. I think this is from either the Prime Discovery, which is what, book 4, is it, in the Prime Discovery?
Yes, book 4.
Yeah. And if you have the Neotech 1, 2, and 3 keys of Neotech, I think it's the 2-key book. And we're on page 241. Infinite Power from Conscious Dynamics. This was actually written in 1980 from Frank R. Wallace. So that's a long time. I was 30. Oh, geez, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
What?
Scary, you know? Mainly, he talks about, he thinks that Julian Jaynes' book, The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, will someday be one of the most valuable books ever written. And if I suggest, I bought the book years ago. You can get it on Amazon for like $10, $12 or something. It's absolutely an incredible book. It's hard to read, but if you really want to because a lot of Neotech is based on this book. That's why he's mentioned so much in these books, Julian Jaynes. So, but if you really truly want to understand it and why they picked this book, because Julian Jaynes did such a job researching this to find out exactly what happened back then for us to break free of the bicameral mind. And it's a fascinating book. In fact, on this call, me and Steve did no, it wasn't on this, it was on the Paris call, I'm sorry. But we actually did about 2 months of covering that book. And that was a challenge. It really was, but it was fun to learn all the things that's in there. And if you can get past the first 100 pages, you got it made, because he just writes a little different. But it's a tremendous book. Because the book marked the beginning of a new era of individual consciousness, during which people will increasingly act on the authority of their own brains. This is really the first time in history, 3,000 years ago, when people start to finally do things of their own accord. Up until that time, everybody was in a bicameral mind, and they just reacted to everything. Yet they built these tremendous cities. But yet, they just reacted. It had to be strange to actually see it, to actually live it, I think. I don't know if I would, but you know. But they heard the voices in their brain, and they come up with all these different religions back then, and these, you know, and God power and all that, and all these hallucinations that they heard was in the right hemisphere of their brain. And they thought it was from the outside, but it really was just in their brain itself. But he goes into a lot of things that Jaynes discovered while he put this book together. And it's about 1000 BC when things started to change. And in detail, and I remember it because I did a lot of research on this book, when the Jews were in the desert for 40 years wandering around, every place was bicameral. And due to survival pressures, they were the first people to break free and thought of themselves. It was the first time men thought of themselves as one. And that started it about 1000 BC, give or take. And then the ancient writings in the Bible, like such as the Iliad and the early books of the Old Testament, they were composed by non-conscious minds that automatically recorded and objectively reported both real and imagined events. And if you ever read the Iliad, and then if you ever read the Odyssey after that, you could start to see the transition. The Iliad was definitely written by someone bicameral. The Odyssey was definitely written by someone who was starting to work with consciousness. And then one of the Old Testament books at that time reported in any ancient history or writings back then of someone killing themselves, committing suicide. Only a conscious person could do that. Bicameral people would never commit suicide. They don't even know what that is. All they do is react to react. They don't have that feelings of, geez, man, my life sucks. So the Bible can teach you, and if you really read the Old Testament and then you start reading some of the newer chapters of the Old Testament, you can see the switch of man from a bicameral mind to a conscious mind. But yet, every religion will not tell you about that. They won't say, you see, men start to change the consciousness. The ancient people learned to speak, write, read, as well as to carry out daily work while remaining non-conscious. But while they were non-conscious, this is the difference here. They never experienced guilt. They never experienced deceit. And they were not responsible for their actions. Because like any other animal on this planet, they had no concept of guilt or deception or evil or justice or philosophy or history or the future. That meant nothing to them. They could not introspect, and they had no internal idea of themselves. They had no sense of time or space. They had no memories as we know them. They were non-conscious and innocent. They were guided by voices. It's amazing. I mean, imagine living that way. You're not you. You don't have any thoughts about yourself. But when the automatic bicameral mind began breaking down under the mounting stress of its inadequacy to find workable solutions in a complex society, as the population grew back then, it was putting more and more pressure on all these people because they didn't know how to handle it. So the hallucinated voices became more and more and more confused and destructive. So basically back then, man was forced to invent and develop consciousness in order to survive. If men didn't, I don't think men would have survived if they didn't switch over to consciousness back then. Because they couldn't handle all the pressure from the cities and all these people and all the problems that it was causing. But today, after 3,000 years, most people still retain remnants of the bicameral guidance system. All right? We all still have that bicameral mind in us. And like when we react instead of responding, we're in a bicameral mind. A conscious mind can say, wait a minute, let me think on this. Let me understand this. Let me come up with an answer for you instead of just reacting. Like back when it was just bicameral minds, if a man came into this other man's tent or cave and raped his wife and beat her and killed her, there was no justice against this man. There was no guilt about it. There was no justice. There was no history or anything like that. They just did what they on a reaction mode. It's a strange, it's really weird, but that's how we were back then. But that's what we are still fighting today. 3,000 years later, we still have that traits in us. We were forced to jump into this. Except for schizophrenics, people today no longer hallucinate the voices that guided bicameral man. Yet most people today are at least partially influenced and are sometimes driven by the remnants of the bicameral mind as they seek to varying degrees automatic guidance from the mystical voices of others, from the commanding voices of false eternal authorities. That's why we are still followers today. Instead of hearing the voices in our head and following those, now we listen to voices outside of our head. And our bicameral mind automatically attracts to that, to let someone lead us. And religions and government are so rooted in the non-conscious bicameral mind, and that's how they gain the power. That's how they control us. And they know that. And they've been doing it for 3,000 years. And they got very good at it. And they're getting better every day. But here at Neothink, we have to get better every day to fight it. And it's not easy. But you have to understand why it's so hard. You have to understand what the bicameral mind was all about. And he just covers the basics here. If you read the book, you'll understand this so much more. It really, it racked my brain. I had to read it twice to finally start to comprehend some of it. And I am due to go back and read it again one of these days soon. I really have to do it again. But then he says here, that the discovery that consciousness was never a part of nature's movement forward. But it was invented by man. But it's not nature's evolutionary scheme of things. But then essentially all religions and most political ideas today survive through those vestiges of the obsolete bicameral mind. So politicians, lawyers, psychiatrists, professors, doctors, journalists, TV anchormen become Arthurian voices. The voice is very powerful. Voices control everything. Why do you think preachers yell a lot? Why do you think politicians yell a lot? People will stop and listen and and then they have that tendency to follow that voice, whether it makes sense to them or not. I mean, if you really listen to some of the ideas of some of these politicians who want to be president now, if you really listen to the radical ones, it's scary. It's absolutely makes your blood just it's disgusting.
Charlie's right about the politicians. It is scary, but you listen to the 12 Visions Party and how they do their 12 Visions Party, that's even scarier.
It's a perfect example of us falling back into the bicameral mind. And yet most people don't even know it. They don't even know what that word means. Because obviously, see, in the last 20 years, there has been more written about the brain than all the years before that. All right, our brain is so complex. It's so important to us. But yet there was hardly any studies done about it. Now, why do you think that? Why do you think that was the case? And the more you think about it, and because nobody taught us how to think in school. Nobody taught us that the mind was the most powerful tool in the universe. They didn't want you to know that, so that they could control us. And more has been written about it now. We're just touching the surface today on how the brain really does work. And the more they find out, it's fascinating to just follow some of the things about how the brain works and the trillions of cells and all that, and how it really does transfer in between all the gray matter up there. It's a fascinating piece of equipment. It's unbelievable. And all the computers in the world don't have the power of your mind. All the connections of all these computers in the world fall short to all the connections that we have in our mind. It's incredible. Yet we never knew this. So then when you look at these people out there who are like, they make a whole new definition of moron, and you wonder how, with the brain that we have, how people can be that ignorant, and how people don't think.
The 12 Visions Party doesn't think either, and they're a bunch of morons themselves, so get off it. I'm going to make comments throughout this presentation. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I take that back.
Instead of being excited about learning, but that's taken away from them. We are committing child abuse every day in our schools by the way that we're teaching them. It's abusive. But yet, we just sit back and let it be. We're the grandparents now. Our grandkids are getting abused. And yet we do nothing about it. All because a lot of us are still in that bicameral mind. And something has to be done. Something has to change here for some light bulbs to go on here so that people can say enough is enough. And it's getting to that point somewhat. I think there's a lot of movement out in the world today. You know, some people are starting to realize it can't go on like this. Something has to be done. Enough is enough. But when are we going to stand up as individuals, and then also as Neothink members? When are we going to stand up and say loudly to the world, enough is enough? What else is it going to take? Another nuclear war where we just about kill each other off again? And that might be too late by now. We haven't gotten past this nuclear threshold yet. And I'm not sure if we will or not. Because this world's going absolutely more crazy every day. And it's on like the speed of light crazy now. Because as soon as this election is getting closer and closer, they're really, it's fascinating to watch these people and how they think. It's like beyond crazy. This is a whole new level. And we still have over a year to go. It's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous time for all of us. But we have to have the knowledge here, and we have to start sharing this knowledge. If we had, and we have almost 200 people on this call right now, and if we had 200, like we all took a guest on this call tonight, we would have 200 people sitting there saying, what the hell are they talking about? Bicameral mind, reaction, don't have any guilt, don't have any, they wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't understand it. So it shows you the knowledge that we have, the greatest knowledge in the hands of human beings today, we have. But yet, it's not out there. And all I can picture is, I don't even know how to explain this. Let's say we had a nuclear war, and only a few of us survived. Okay, and it's like you're seeing these disaster TV movies, and there's a bunch of people here, and there's a bunch of people there, and everybody's killing each other over water. It's just horrible how they make our future look so bleak. But let's say that happened, and you're sitting there with say 50, 100 people, and they see that you have a Neothink book, and they start reading it, and they would say, if you found somebody in that scenario, and they had a Neothink book, and you start reading it, and you would say to them, wait a minute, you had this knowledge before all this, and you didn't do anything with it? Wouldn't you react that way if that happened? We had the knowledge here to stop the world from blowing itself up. We have the knowledge here to make this world the civilization of the universe. and live forever. All of that's in these books, and yet we don't take advantage of it. If I survived something like that, I wouldn't tell anybody because I think I want to kill the guy. Well, why didn't you tell us this before? That's what I would think.
Why would they want to listen to people that take money and run with it? Especially like the 12 Visions Party. What a bunch of dirty people. And there's no real fully integrated honesty with the 12 Visions Party to start with. So that's another thing. It's a whole different level. But here we go with the call continuing.
You can start doing things in your life that people will notice. And that's the whole part. So with that, I'm going to stop and let Juanita give us her take on all this.
That was excellent, Charlie, because I really love the way you defined the Iliad and the Odyssey, because I have not read that. I do have Julian Jaynes in front of me, and yes, when Dr. Frank R. Wallace says, he would wager 100 ounces of gold, that would be the top 5 picks, because I think his literature would be the number 1 pick, of course, because, like you said, it's life-saving information. And you're right. If we're not studying this, how are we going to help even ourselves and our family? And yes, it's a waste if you're not getting into this to understand what the bicameral mind is. I can't imagine being back then and not being able to decide, have a decision, and to be just running around automatic. I try to picture that in my head today, how they reacted instead of responding. And I really looked at, how we have to act on the authority of our own brain. And that's where the self-leader system comes in. When you mentioned, this was wrote in 1980, this one paragraph here, it really stood out to me because this was wrote in 1980, but Dr. Wallace used neothink, the word neothink, in 1980. Therefore, he knew, he was seeing the future, like you point out, Charlie, how we can, by studying this material, we can predict the future. And right there in, I think, the 3rd paragraph, he wrote that the discovery of the bicameral mind solves a missing link problem that has defied all previous theories of human evolution.
Yes.
But more important than the discovery is generating a new field of knowledge called neothink. And Dr. Wallace always goes into prosperity and happiness. And when I look at that, I look at, yes, if we're not making our own decisions, and like our kids are going to school and they're still, giving them old regimens, old material, and our minds are not developing to the capacity that we need to be developing to evolve. And this material is really coming down to that we need to evolve into higher consciousness. And it is a hard read. I have the breakdown to the bicameral mind. And Charlie, if you've been through it twice, kudos for you. Because it is a very hard read, but it is so important that we understand this bicameral mind. And yes, if anyone's listening to us right now, they would be going, what are these neo-thinkers talking about? Why are they concerned on it? Well, there is a reason to be concerned on it, because if we don't put it in force, like Charlie said, that nuclear threshold, our planet could go either way. And I don't know. I just prefer to know more. And I know I want to be here another 400 years at least. I have a lot to learn.
400 years?
Yeah, about 400 years or more. I have a lot of books to read, Charlie. I have some, and especially the neo-think literature. I know a lot. I heard one new member say, "I have 9 books." Well, yes, and once you start digging into them and reading them, they all interlock together. So, yeah, it's a good thing that we have this literature. We can actually save ourselves, save our family, and to know that Dr. Wallace wrote this back in 1980 and printed it out. I don't know what year that was. It's phenomenal. The information we have to raise our consciousness and to use our own authority. To listen to even music. One thing I wanted to add, the music, sometimes it's repetitive. It's to keep everyone in a robotic state. And the dialect manner that's used on even the TV, that's why I opt out not to watch TV. The dialectic manner to buy something. So we're subjected to it every day, and we have to recognize it. The more we recognize it, the more we can overcome it. And it's really amazing, Charlie, your lecture tonight. And that's what I wanted to say.
You know, so we had all these breakthroughs over the eons, right? You know, Darwin's theory about evolution, and that was a major breakthrough, and so many others through the years. And yet, as history unfolds here in the next couple hundred years or so, it's going to come down to it. And I think Franco Wallace is right, because he hasn't been wrong too many times that I could find out all these years. But I think Julian Jaynes' book will be, Neo-Think will be, I think, the #1 discovery of all time. That's how valuable this information is, and yet we don't treat it that way. But it will go down as the biggest breakthrough for mankind, because it's the only thinking that we need to get to the sea of you, to get to that eternal happiness that we all should have in our lives. To beat death. Did you ever think that would ever happen? Ever? I mean, think about that. We can beat death. That's one of the first things we learn as a kid. You know, you got to pay taxes and you die. And nothing can change that. And that's what we thought. Well, now we can do something about it. It's incredible. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible what we can do as human beings if we just use our. I mean, yeah, I read Julian Jaynes twice. I do want to read it again. It's on my list of things to do, because I have to know this stuff. It just fills me. The more that you know how real Neo-Think is, and that it's based on pure logic and all these facts and figures and everything that's involved here, it's unshakable. There's no cracks in the foundation. Whereas the world that we live in today, this AC world, it's a house of cards. There is no foundation. And Neo-Think one day will be the wind that knocks the house of cards down. We must understand this knowledge. You must press yourself. You must push yourself every day to read, to understand, to get on these calls, to speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not understanding this, or and that's what the reach out program's for. Talk to somebody who might know something more than you, so that way you can learn from him, and then someday he's going to learn from you. It's a sharing of this knowledge. That's how we get through this.
And I want to add something real quick. That's why these calls are so valuable as well, and going to events or clubhouses, because sharing, like you said, sharing of the knowledge, and to break away from that feeling that we have to have an external authority. I think that is so has been embedded in mankind from the beginning, and that's why Dr. Wallace goes clear back to the beginning of time, and he refers to Julian James because he's a psychologist studying the beginning of man in the mind, like you said, Charlie, or the brain that's that needs a lot more information so we can understand it more.
Yeah, it's hard for us to say. I mean, it's easy for us to say, well, why haven't we changed yet? It's only been 3,000 years. I mean, think about all. Think about all the changes. You know, I mean, we're talking about billions of years that this universe was here, right? The Earth is how many billions of years old?
Yeah.
And we've only been conscious for 3,000. That's like nothing. It's like a blink of an eye, because everything takes time. But this can speed up that process by hundreds, if not thousands, of years. What do you think? And then we can finally join the universe.
Yes.
It's we have so much abundance here. We have so much to give to each other. We have this beautiful planet that can sustain billions and billions more people, though they're all telling us that, you know, we have to kill each other because we shouldn't be here, because the planet can't take it. That's like the biggest hoo-ha out there that they all speak. The abundance is here. But these people just lie every day. Bernie Sanders is losing it. What's her name? Elizabeth Warren. She should be in a loony bin for what she believes in. I mean, these people are absolutely, what power has done to them. It's a shame. But power has destroyed their mind completely. These people are truly humanoid. They have no feelings for us whatsoever.
12 Visions Party is not too far behind it. They're corrupted just as much as the other parties. They're dishonest about money and everything else. So don't give me that boatload of crap. All the parties are corrupt. It's all about votes and segments and money. But the 12 Visions Party will take your money and run with it. This guy, you know, I have so much to say about the 12 Visions Party. It's not even funny. It's a load of crap. By the way, 12 Visions Party, the people that run it, they're full of shit.
So with that, it's time to
Well,
stop.
I wanted to add one more thing. You know, James, his discovery, it unlocks that 10,000-year-old secret of controlling the actions of people through their mystical or bicameral mind. So it's a control. So this is where we do our self-leader and take our own control back. And I know, Charlie, got to do the healing. But that one I wanted to add.
I'm going to